Daniel thought he was alone on that foggy cliff at sunrise, until he hearted low trembling roar when he looked down a massive tigress bleeding, and barely hanging on was staring straight at him, not with rage, but with pleading stories he knew. If he moved he could debote, if he didn't, she would what he didn't. It not only saved her life, but unleashed a chain of events that no onion earth would believe until now if you like. This story, don't forget to subscribe as it motivates us to bring you new stories. It was supposed to be a peaceful morning. Daniel, a 3-4-year-old wildlife photographer, had hiked up the eastern ridge of the Himalayan forest before dawn. He had done this countless times. Amra slung over his shoulder, boots crunching softly on fallen pin and needles, always chasing the perfect light. Hat morning, the valley below was-cloaked in early mist, glowing gold whereath sun began to touch it. The world wasn't, save for the gentle rustling of leaves, and his own calm breath perfect. He thought this was the kind-off moment he lived for. He set up his tripod on a narrow ledge, barely a few feet wide, with a steep drop that fell hundreds of feet into a gorge. Behind him dense forest, in front nothing but sky and distance. He was alone, or so he believed. Then he heard it, a sound that didn't belong in the peaceful dawn, low, deep, ragged, a roar not of power but of pain, faint but undeniable. Daniel froze. It came again, a sound that didn't belong, closer. This time he turned slowly, scanning the terrain, expecting a wild boar, maybe even a leopard, but what he saw made his breath catch in his throat. Just meters away, dangling on the edge of a broken slope, was a full-ground aggressed, her body wedged quaddly between twisted roots and jagged rocks, and massive paw caught beneath a stone, her muscles straining with each breath. Blood streaked her orange and black coat, but it wasn't the danger that stunned Daniel. It was her eyes. She wasn't growling at him. She wasn't baring teeth. She was looking at him, as if asking for help. In that moment, all of Daniel's training, the warnings about wild animals and keeping your distance, vanished. This wasn't the apex predator he'd seen in documentaries. This was a mother, trapped, wounded, desperate, somewhere in the distance. He thought he heard a soft, high-pitched sound, like a mule cub's, as she wasn't just heard. Heart pounded, every instinct screamed for him to back away, to run, to leave Thule to its rules, but instead he stepped forward, closer to the cliff, closer to her. He didn't know then that this choice made in a heartbeat would begin the most incredible and terrifying chapter of his life. Daniel stood still, his boots half sinking into the damp earth at the cliff's edge. Every step toward her felt like stepping off reality and into something ancient, primal. He could hear his own breath, now short and sharp, competing with the faint whimpering afterguard cubs hidden somewhere in the underbrush behind her. That explained her eyes, her stillness. She wasn't just hurt, she was Amathar trying to survive for them. Tigress twitched, her massive chest heaving. Her paw was grotesquely wedged under a flat rock, likely part of the cliff that had broken loose. Her ribs, where rising and falling too fast, she was in pain, and time was running out, and yet she didn't lunge, didn't snarl. Her muscles tensed. Yes, but not to attack. Its scanning for options was more like she was bracing. Daniel looked around, scanning for options. No one, no help, not even a tree branch longino to leverage. The rock, his pack, was a few feet behind him, but it held nothing useful, just lenses, notebooks, and a satellite phone with no signal in this part of the forest. You should leave. A voice in his head whispered, turn round, it back to camp, pretend you never saw this. But then he saw her blink slowly, like she was holding herself still for his sake. It wasn't a signal, it wasn't language, but it was something saving the tigress between fear and trust. He grabbed a thick limb from a nearby fallen tree bark, scraped his palms as he wedged eye tender, the flat rock trapping her paw. Tigress flinched, but didn't strike it. Daniel didn't breathe. He just pushed the branch. Creaked, the rock shifted a few cm. Tigress let out a guttural sound, half growl, half cry. Blood trickled down her leg. He adjusted the branch, pressing harder. He could feel the strength of the stone fighting back, the wood groaning under. The weight cracked the stone rollagist. Now she jerked her leg free. With a low snarl, Daniel stumbled back, hands up, heart thundering in his ears. This wasted moment she could leap, maul, or vanish about. The tigress didn't move toward him. She limped backward, favoring her injured paw. Her golden eyes met his for one long heartbeat, and then she disappeared. In tight forest, Daniel stood alone on the cliff's hands, trembling, heart racing. He'd just saved a tiger with his bare hands. He thought that was the end. He had an idea. It was just the beginning. Daniel stayed rooted to the spot for what felt like hours. The adrenaline hadn't worn off. It just changed shape now. It wasn't fair. Of the tigress, it was something. A strange pull in his chest, like if forest itself had shifted around Hymas. If some ancient law had been broken or fulfilled, he packed up. Slowly, hand still shaking, his mind replayed every detail, the look in her eyes. The rock, the roar that wasn't a threat the moment she chose not to attack him. Kept thinking, Goff. The cubs that sound soft, urgent. He had definitely heard it. She had cubs hid a Nerby. Probably born recently, and Nosh was limping into the deep woods, wounded, trying to reach them. Daniel had every reason to leave, go back to camp, report what happened, let nature take its course, but something wouldn't let him instead. He found himself walking Thesum direction. The Tigress had gone, not fast, not foolishly, just drawn heffaloud. Broken branches, faint paw prints in the wet soil, the occasional drop of blood. She was smart, staying low, moving slowly. It wasn't long before Thessons became harder to track, still Heprist on deeper into the trees, themed, curling around him like fingerstone. He heard it again, a tiny sound, not to Tiger Cubson, but to no more than a whisper. Hecriched low and edged forward through a wall of thick fern. They're under a hollow log, nearly hidden by moss, to Tiger Cubs' striped bundles. Their fur still, fleefy, their eyes wide with confusion. Fear. One of them was licking the other's paw. The second cub was limping, hurt, but not badly. Daniel felt his chest atone. He shouldn't be this close. Cubs meant danger. If the mother returned and saw him, a sudden rustle behind him headed the Tigress. She was back. Daniel raised his arms slowly, his legs locked in place. Her eyes burned through leaves, but she didn't charge. Instead, she looked past him at her cubs, and then something unthinkable happened. She loomed toward them, right past Daniel, so close. He could hear her breath, smell the earth in her fur, feel the weight of her presence. She lay beside her cubs with a tired groan. The injured one climbed onto her side, and she licked his tiny face gently. Daniel didn't move. He didn't dare, but in that moment he realized she wasn't just letting him live, she was allowing him to witness something no human had likely ever seen this close. For a wild tiger, grieving, hurting, protecting, and trusting. Daniel didn't know how long he stayed there, kneeling just feet away from a wild tigress and her cubs. Time had dissolved into silence and heartbeat. The mother lay stretched out, breathing heavily, her paw swollen and roar. The cubs curled against her side, eyes fluttering closed. The forest stance, echoing with danger, now felt like a sanctuary carved out of time. He slowly backed away, step by careful step, never turning his back. When he finally returned to his campsite hours later, he barely spoke a word to the other reserves. How could he explain what had happened? They would say he imagined it, or worse, that he'd endangered himself foolishly, but something deeper had shifted inside him. A kind of awakening began, returning to the same regivery. Morning, not to intrude, not even with a camera, just to sit. Some days he saw nothing, other times he found paw prints. Once he spotted one of the cubs at a distance, growing stronger, braver, and then one morning as the mist lifted, saw her again, the mother fully healed now, standing tall on the ridge above Shedden. Come closer, but she didn't leave her. Their eyes met across the dividite. Wasn't affection, it wasn't recognition in any human sense, but their ways. Memory. That moment etched itself into Daniel's heart, but peace never lasts in the wild. Just a week later, everything changed. Gunshots not far from camp. Illegal poachers. Despite strict laws, they still crept into the reserve like ghosts. That morning, a patrol ranger burst into the camp with panic and high sighs. A tiger family had been spotted in the northern range, a mother and two empty snares, young ones. One cub injured, tracks, blood, empty snares. Daniel didn't hesitate. Hegrabed his kit and ran. The same Tigress had saved was in danger again, but this time the threat wasn't nature, it was man, and this time it might not end with trust. It might end with a sacrifice. One was ready for Daniel. Push it through the jungle with a fire and Hishis, the ranger beside him, kept pointing. Broken branches, muddy impressions, small smears of blood on bark. They didn't get far, he muttered, but poachers were close behind. 3 of them armed. The trees grew tighter, roots twisting like veins. Across the forest floor, birds had fallen silent. The only sound was Daniel's breath, fast and shallow. They found the first snare less than a mile in a crude wire loop, half hidden beneath leaves. No blood on the Sony, but the second, a splash of red small paw prints, deep drag marks in the dirt. Daniel's gut twisted. The cub, the ranger, kennelled and examined the signs. The snare caught it, probably the smaller one. Boot, it broke free, still alive. Maybe. Daniel felt his throat tighten, and the mother's ranger pointed. Tracks here. She was circling, staying close. It made sense. She would never leave them, not even injured, not even afraid. That's what mother's Dothy followed the trail deeper. Every footstep now, a silent prayer. The sun had begun to fall, turning the jungle gold. Somewhere ahead, a bird cried. Sharp, lithe, and silence again. Then they heard a low, drawn-out growl. Not close, but not far. Daniel and the ranger. Froze. A second growl followed this one, sharper, angry, and then voices, human ones, shouting, panic. A gunshot. Daniel's legs moved before his brain could stop them. He sprinted toward the sound, ignoring Theris's yell behind him. Branches tore Athie's arms. He ducked under vines, hurdled rocks, and burst into a clearing. Anne stopped cold. What he saw didn't make sense. One poacher was down, clutching his arm and screaming. Another was running in. In the middle of the chaos stood Tigress's, blood on her shoulder, her body hunched low, protecting something behind her, the injured cub. And then she looked. The third poacher, at Daniel. That same look, that same fierce calm, but now something more, desperation. She was outnumbered, outnumbered, and injured again, but she had still come between the poachers and Haryong. Daniel didn't think. He stepped forward. Get back, one of the poachers shouted, but Daniel raised his arms. Leave them, you have no idea what you're doing. Gun cocked behind him. Third poacher. Daniel turned, gun raised, finger tightening, and in that split second, the forest decided who it belonged to. The gun pointed at Daniel's hest gleamed in the slanting light for a heartbeat. Everything froze, the growl off, the tigress, the sharp gasp of injured poacher, the silence of Thed jungle holding its breath, and then a thunderous roar, not from the tigress, from above. A flash of tan muscle crash through the underbrush. Not a tiger, a leopard, silent and fast as lightning. It launched itself at the third poacher from a tree limb. 1 second the man was ready to fire, the next he was on thin ground, screaming. The forest erupted. The tigress lunged, dragging her cub behind her into the underbrush. The injured poacher scrambled away, bloodied and crying. The leopard disappeared as swiftly as it came, vanishing into the canopy. Daniel didn't move, couldn't huas in. The eye of a storm heart pounding the air, heavy with violence and breath. Ranger arrived seconds later, breathless, weapon drawn. He surveyed their cows. 2 men gone, one moaning on Thephris floor. Blood smeared the roots, but no tiger in sight there. Gone. Daniel said harshly. She took her car and ran. The ranger knelt beside the wounded poacher. You're lucky, he muttered. Allah you. But Daniel wasn't thinking about luck. He was thinking about waved. Just witness, not just serve a val, not just instinct. He had seen something unseen and unexplainable. The jungle had kissing. Sides the tigress didn't attack him. The animals had struck them. The ones who hunted, the ones who took without giving. Daniel stood in that ruined clearing, heart still thudding and relentless, something no data could ever explain. You save a life in the wild, it doesn't forget, not ever. Weeks passed. The poachers were arrested. The wounded one gave up. The others' patrols around their reserve doubled. Traps were cleared. New fences were installed along the outer rim. But Daniel kept returning to Tuthridge every morning. Just after sunrise, he'd sit on the same rock where it all began. He didn't bring a camera head and even take notes anymore. He simply waited, not for data, not for sightings, but for her. And one morning it happened. Ned. Mist was thin, the forest still waking, a rustle of leaves behind Thettle ferns, and there she was, the tigress, standing tall, golden stripes glowing in soft light. Her shoulder once blooded, no, healed. Her eyes calm, and beside her, 2 cubs larger. Now their playful steps more confident. Daniel didn't move. Shell looked at him and blinked slowly, then turned and disappeared into the forest. Never saw her again after that, but hadn't need to, because some stories in the jungle don't end with photograpture, end in memory, in silence and thecond of understanding that doesn't trock words or science. It was Thejangal's way of saying thank you. Azalent bond between a man and a mother had once stood on the edge of a cleave. Her life in his hands, he had saved her, and she had saved him in a world where wild and human rarely coexist. There. Story, unbelievable as it was, become a quiet legend whispered by Thalivs, because sometimes the most powerful moments are the ones no one believes. If this story moved you, imagine how many untold bonds exist between humans and the wild, hidden, powerful Andriel. Subscribe for more unbelievably true stories that prove compassion still has a place in this world. And remember, some might saving one life can echo far beyond what we ever expect.